come to me, but then I thought, is it coming to me? Because I want to be smarter. Is it coming to me from what I heard? And I was that's what I do.
Really? Oh, really? Very. Okay. Oh, yeah. I've felt Make what?
Kemper?
Oh, okay. I thought you said pepper, and I thought, wow, I didn't know you said pepper. I kind of enjoy the words.
Thank you. Before we began, Terry, who's my husband, put one of these little slips of paper underneath every chair. If you don't have one, raise your hand, let me know. Count this little slip. Okay, great. We're going to do a pair practice, and this pair practice is one kind of way of asking evoking questions. And in particular, the kind of question we're going to ask is that a listener, the speaker is going to answer this question, it's up on the board here. How has the Spirit been active in your life recently? And you can, there may be many ways, but you can pick a way. You have 5 minutes to talk about that. How is the Spirit? How is God? How is Christ? How is the light? Or how is love with a capital L? How is truth with a capital T been active in your life recently? And then the speaker has 5 minutes to speak about that. The listener listens with a loving, total acceptance and support of whatever's being said, without asking questions, without making comments. Your mind may be interpreting or analyzing or stuff like that. Try to let that go. Try to just be present with the person and what they're sharing, listening on all those different levels, listening to the deeper resonances of what the person is sharing, listening or sensing the presence of the Spirit within this moment. If your speaker stops speaking during that 5 minutes, maybe after 3 minutes they run out of something to say and they stop, you just wait with them. It's surprising how often, when someone thinks they're done, they have this receptive listener who doesn't jump in. More will come. So the speaker has 5 minutes to speak about that. I think on the live stream what we might do is have one person who's good at typing can share in typing to the others in the live stream, and I'll give you another assignment for that. So then, anyway, your speaker has spoken for 5 minutes. I'm going to ring the chime. That means speaker stops speaking, finishes your sentence, stop speaking. The listener now has listened for 5 minutes. And you take a moment and pause and sense what you've heard. And what you're looking for is a moment in what they've shared. All right, so they're talking about how has the Spirit been active in you or your life recently? Something that actually happened, or some inner experience or outer experience, where you think something was going on with the Spirit. And you'll say, in that moment, when this happened, or you did this, or somebody said that, how did you experience the Spirit? Or what was going on inside of you? Or just simply, can you say more about that moment? So try to keep it short, and then the person has 2 more minutes to speak. So this is just practice in identifying a moment to invite them to savor and look more closely at how God or Spirit was at work in them. Does anybody have any questions about that? So the speaker has a total of 7 minutes, and then you'll trade roles. On the live stream, I was thinking if one person can write for 5 minutes, and then the others on the live stream can offer a question. So it's not quite the same exercise, but you might see that not everybody picks the same moment to draw out, and that there are many possibilities. There's not one right way to do that. Any other questions about this? All right, so I invite you to find a new partner to share with, and do that quickly. We'll begin. I'll ring the chime to start, and then 5 minutes. And then have a partner.
Trish, all right?
There you go. Right. You're an active on the parish. My life is something I don't know about what's going on. And I should feel like there's wow. There's a lot of somebody recommending, and I very much feel like I can
your chart. First one. I'm out there.
It's not the same. In other words, all these things. And I'm not sure that I should generate them.
That's pretty much we do. So I thought about it.
My pride.
Kind of, but it kept keeping coming back. People use their phones. So I brought it to the parish with that. I don't use my phone. Showed it to them.
But I don't know that that's actually.
Then it got dropped.
I'm always doing meaningful things.
So then I brought it up again.
Because I was doing that when he was
I'm not.
a child. You never get to hear your number of times in my life where it's more out there.
One year. About a year and a half ago. Because we restarted. Then it's church delivery. Again, thinking in March of 2020. I mean, my wife.
And there's no treasure. And I feel like that's like part of the culture.
So it seems like I'd like to tell me more.
I can perhaps all I need to do is everybody right. That's kind of rare. I feel like I'm that was confession. Spiritually. I've had many experiences that are different.
And I'm grateful.
But same way.
And I just stopped my patient.
First, can we do something? You know,
has this breakdown of infrastructure. It's like to compensate the way that I can share this. It's sort of like I feel like with gratitude for the
I've been coming to here.
Quiet in place.
Not because I recognize it.
trying to understand
So the listener reflects on what you've heard, and you ask, say more about a particular moment or something that they shared where you think there might be more to say about how the spirit was active. Something about their experience, not their ideas. Say more about that.
About how we should.
Spirit's
I think resisting
Should do with I have say I'm working on
whatever I just turned over. Well, those lines
present. And I feel that
So I get excited about that. Just to make sure that actually happens. And I watch her. It's like she was experiencing important.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I don't share. The way I learned. It was beautiful. And I knew it.
Okay, now it's time to trade, and the other person has the speaker.
It's your
5 minutes. How has the spirit been active in you or your life recently?
We're still talking about say more about how the spirit.
It's funny.
My turn.
It's a percentage. Describing that something. I started out responsibility and but I am doing situation my responsibility.
I do 3 things.
In various
And I'm not
necessary to how these rights
first time
language to some of the situations but the sense of
That's how they do it. You have to, then he tasted it, and I tasted it. And showed him he tried it, and he liked it. That's the kind of thing that it's really hard.
and also feeling free to take that and then I also go forward chapters. And it's a familiar pattern. I didn't feel why I know
Okay, the listener reflects on what you've heard. You ask to say more about a particular moment of experience.
However, I was trying to say you like the question, but I also don't really.
I had gone to sleep before I went to sleep. Asking this question, and I woke up at 2:30 feeling I have a role. It's not a role that
We don't have any.
and I imagine it's not a role, and I feel like I understand how to carry it. And I can and I also had a desire because I know and I think
I've grown up
for long, sometimes I feel like So I did get jotted down a few, like,
I think we're in Florida, we have in summer fall. In Orange County, south of Los Angeles.
so cool to go so and I tried to just,
Sounds like
and then I did go back to approach the host.
So thank your partner for this.
the dog was behind my bike, so I had to borrow Buzz's bike. It's longer than I expected.
Tools in the shed.
So I have a question for you in your role as listener. What was it like to find a moment to ask them to say more about, ask them to go back into and pay attention to? How was it to find that moment and ask them to say more?
You had to do some discerning, because 5 minutes probably was at least 500 or 5,000 words. So you had to mine for the gold, the diamond, the nugget.
Exactly the metaphor Lynda was using earlier in our conversation. Yes. Anything else? Dana?
I didn't get around to asking a question because just trying to reflect back a bit of what had been shared just opened it up again. So a question wasn't really.
So it was really just identifying that moment that you wanted them to expand on, or
Not even that, it was just, you know, I reflected back a couple of things and so it didn't require a question to go deeper.
okay. What else? What was it like?
Yeah, I had to remind myself, I think 3 times, don't ask what you're interested in. Don't, that's, yeah, just self-cueing. What's the question?
Right.
I glanced down at the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, because several things were interesting to my story.
Right. Right. But what would be most helpful to that person to explore more?
Yeah, I just was very aware that that was an interest of mine, maybe not what I was supposed to.
Okay, that's important. We were also talking about how this is a practice that requires self-discipline. It's a spiritual discipline. It's a learning how to listen, not to get the information or to satisfy my curiosity or interest, although that might happen, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is how to serve this person's relationship with spirit and their increasing awareness and understanding, faithfulness. Anybody else want to comment on that? Terry?
It helps me to remind myself that I don't have to find the perfect question, or this moment is fine in itself, but this isn't like, there's a lot more going to happen in this person's life.
Yeah.
Yes.
You don't have to find the perfect thing to ask. And what was it like when someone asked you to go back and look at a moment or say more about something?
Felt like an invitation to me. Not only that, but like they had heard.
First time I did this exercise, I was embarrassed to be in the spotlight for so long. And then they wanted more. So it was a curious experience.
Did you find it helpful? Did anything new come out of being asked to look at and say more about some moment?
I found the second question that way was more spontaneous than the first one. In that sense, it touched a part that was more responsive than thought out. You know?
Touch something responsive in you.
Right.
Did you say, did we find anything helpful? Is that what you said? It's helpful, that's not even an adequate word for what I feel, to be known and to have a question asked that let me know that I was heard, but also just the experience of getting known a little bit more and then conversely knowing a little bit more is deeply right, human.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I found I was a little bit confused about reflecting and asking and what I should do when, so I think I just conflated them. But then Terry, what you said speaks to my irritation with myself that, okay, so we were just sitting in love and in spirit with each other, and things rose.
Is there anything on the live stream that, nope, okay.
Just to sum up, in my own experience, things people have said, that when someone asks you a question, wanting to go deeper into something that you said, Viv said it's an invitation, and Martha said it's like, oh, they really were listening, and wanting to know more, and it's an invitation to a deeper intimacy for both people.
I felt changed by both listening and being heard.
Is there anything you can say about what changed?
I think I'm elaborating on what Martha said about knowing and being known. That experience of deep knowing, it was a gift, and it moved me deeper and further on my path.
Yes.
So that was an example of an evoking question, what you just asked her.
It just occurred to me that if you can't come up with a really evoking question, it's probably better just to be very generic, because you could really discourage the speaker with wrong question. I mean, a poorly thought out question, or poorly elicited. If you weren't listening, if you missed something, and then you tried to cover up.
So in a real faithfulness group, if you're in that situation, you just don't ask a question. You're quiet.
Well, okay, yeah, okay.
All right. So when this was a particular assignment, I asked you to come up with a question. But in a faithfulness group, you wait until there's something that seems like a live question. You may not know where the question comes from. It might seem a little out of the blue. It may not seem to go anywhere at that moment. You don't need to judge your own questions either. You're just listening. I feel like the Spirit's asking you to ask this question, ask the question. The person may have an insight because of it. They may not. They may actually reflect on the question afterwards. Later. You don't know.
I wanted very much to know the answer to the question I was asked, and I didn't know it. But I think I will carry that question with me. Not knowing the answer didn't make it maybe it made it the best question.
Yeah, sometimes the big gift is not new understanding, but a new question to carry and to live with.
Good. So, are you ready to be spectators for a little bit and see what a group might look like? And Martha, are you ready to be?
I'm ready.
Okay.
To be.
And so we've got Martha as the focus person, and
Martha, do you want to sit there?
Oh, sure.
and Lynda and Lola, you want to be here or you want to sit out?
Up to you.
It's up to you.
It's up to you.
Come join us,
You.
Lola.
All right, there you go.
I think we could all do it.
Okay.
Now, what's going to be, what's interesting here is that there's a dance going on, right? Because 1, 2, 3, 4 of us might have a question all at the same time. Who's going to be the one that pipes up?
Can we move our chairs closer? I'm not going to be able to hear
Sure.
here.
Sure. Any place you want, Rita.
You can do it alone.
So what we're going to do is, we're going to do an abbreviated schedule here. I mean, Martha's got probably a very interesting topic, but we also have a limited amount of time. So we're going to do, how does this sound? 10 minutes of what would typically be 15. So not 15, but 10. Then we're going to do clarifying questions, which are just factual, and they don't take long. And then we're going to take a moment, we don't know how long, and then we're taking a moment to just settle, and then we're going to go into what would typically be 35 minutes, but no, we're not going to do it for 35, we'll do it for 18. So 18, if you're from a Jewish tradition, is
Chai.
Chai, right? So that's for life, and then we're going to do the debrief with everybody. Is that good?
And we might take more than 5 for that?
Yeah. So typically that might take just a few minutes. We'll say few. But here, we're going to take what it takes. And then after that, we're going to throw you into the pond, and you can do it too. So
who's the convener for this group?
good question.
So Martha has just said she'd really like her questioners to be more visible to her. So if we move back a little, we're not in the way of these friends.
Is that, I don't mean to cut anyone off.
That's good.
So who's the convener? If you want to be,
Okay.
all right. So the convener is going to be keeping track of 10 instead of 15 and those kind of things.
All right. So I will remind us that we're here to be present with Martha and Martha's relationship with God, with the Spirit, as she attempts to be faithful in her life. So Martha, when you're ready, out of the silence, you can speak for 10 minutes.
Well, first I want to say that I want to just set the big context, and that is that I've lived in Philadelphia since 1989, and I've lived in the house where I'm living since 2000, and I've had the job that I have for almost 30 years. And I'm leaving my house, I'm retiring from my job, and I'm moving to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And that's the context. With my wife. And as I was preparing, I found myself kind of formulating a question, which I'll share, but I also feel like what a phrase Marcelle used this morning was divine accompaniment. And that's what I'm here for. And I'll try to stay focused on one or two things in my sharing. I'll tell you about the three things I kind of am focusing on. One is, you can tell from my brief outline of the past 30 years, I've had this regularity. I would like to ask God and Spirit for faith to embrace the unknown. And I had something recently, there's a couple experiences I had recently. I'm moving to New Mexico. My wife and I are both retiring. She has family there. And we have a house that we've gotten now, and so we're moving. And for 5 years in my living room, I've convened a morning of the Evergreen worship group, and that's kind of, as I said, the heart of my spiritual community. For the last 2 years, our worship group has also been focusing on being anti-racist. And so this past Friday, we met in my house for the last time. And after worship, we asked for prayer requests, and one person said she was thankful. She wanted to thank the Spirit for having us had this space for these years, and all the people who have come through. And her prayer of thanks was to the Spirit. And it was really reassuring to me, because the Spirit is everywhere. The Spirit will be in Santa Fe. It's very hard to leave these people I love so much and this space that we've created for these years, this sacred community, sacred space, and practice. But Susan's prayer of thanks to God reminded me that's what it was about. So I don't have a question with that. I'm just sharing that as an aid, a consolation, a recent note. But that was as I say, it's like a consolation. I still am very unfamiliar with having such a clean palette, a blank palette. My marriage, I know. We have a house. We can walk to Santa Fe Friends meeting. These are the things that I know. But that's a lot of unknown. A lot. And one of my hopes is, but see, I don't know if this is, is the experience of worship group, of an intimate worship group, is what I hope I will find, or I will draw, or I will invite, or share that I've had that experience. But I don't know what the way is. So that's, how much time do I have?
4 minutes.
Okay, so there's another piece, and if you haven't done a group before, this is probably bad practice, because I feel like I'm bringing kind of two things that are kind of related, but they're both very much on my needs. I have been having, waking up at 2:30 often, and not being able to go back to sleep, period. I've been packing, the movers are coming on the 7th. I have a full-time teaching job, packing a house where I've lived since 2000. It's just been overwhelming, and I haven't been able to sleep often. And I got someone gave me a guidance to do this, to imagine that the part of me that's keeping me awake has good intentions for me. And to ask the part of me what are their intentions. And I'd like to share what I wrote, or what the part wrote in the middle of the night this morning before coming here. This part of me that wakes me up writes, I connect you with your own heart. I nurture your inner child. I help you know the channel to God. I nurture the fullness of your being. And I pull back the curtain to let you see who you are. This part of me is furious because I just have been shutting it away. There isn't time. There isn't time for spiritual discernment. There isn't time for my inner self. There isn't time for God and me. Is how it feels. And this part of me was when I yelled a bit over the phone, this part of me was I wasn't yelling, but was yelling. Do this, make time. But I don't know how right now. It's just too much. And I don't know what's going to happen and how I'm going to continue, especially the anti-racism work. It's just going to be different. Because I live in Philly, I'm going to live in Santa Fe, it's going to be different. But I still am feeling that has become a core, a very important part of my spiritual life. I think that's about it.
Okay, you have 1.5 more minutes.
How do you be comfortable with not knowing? How do I let go of needing to know what I'm going to be doing?
Are there any brief, factual questions of clarification that somebody needs to ask? Let's take a moment in silence to listen to what we've heard and to how the Spirit is guiding us into the deeper questions.
getting on a train to where were you going?
Calcutta.
Calcutta.
27 hours on a train, I think.
To the unknown. What did you call on at that time that might be helpful at this time?
At that time, I knew that I was going to learn something where I was going. Now, I think it's probably true here too. But there is not a structured way. But I was sure. I mean, I knew that I was going to learn something. And I kind of knew the domain of what I would be learning, but although I didn't know. Yeah. I knew I was going to learn.
In a similar vein, what's coming up for me is you spoke earlier about being a playwright. And I hear that the stage is set and that we know what the play is somewhat going to be set, where it's going to be set, and we know some of the characters, but we really don't know what's going to happen. So what happens if you become like a member of the audience? What are the characteristics of a good audience member?
Good audience member is open. They're open. Sometimes it's good if they're a little bit prepared, but it's not really necessary. Really, openness is the biggest thing, I think, to receive, to welcome, especially if they don't know the play, to welcome the unexpected, to welcome what are we in for? To have a kind of a inviting of the play. They also need to be able to. It's great if they can empathize with the characters that they meet on stage, or in this case, if they be curious about the characters. But openness is the main thing. Open-hearted.
I'm wondering if, as the actor, I'm making an assumption that you do acting. Okay. So I'm wondering if, as the actor then in said play, if you ever have the experience of discomfort, because you don't know how the audience will receive your portrayal of the role or the play itself. So do you ever go out into the stage and experience discomfort? And then what do you do when that happens?
Sure.
How do you address that discomfort?
Well, often, I think, like right at the beginning, it takes time to warm up into the play. No, some occasionally not, but very often it takes some time, some length of minutes to really warm up, relax, trust that I know my part, or I know the play. Yeah, and I mean, the greatest thing is when we do get a response, you know, that oh, there's a ripple of laughter, or there's some feeling that I can get that they're getting it, you know, and it's affirming and encouraging to go on. But the discomfort, I absolutely, and it takes, you have to just sort of act as if, you know, like just go on, do what you know, and trust it. Yeah.
Martha, I'm assuming that you and your wife Jean had a leading to move to Santa Fe, and I wonder if you can say anything about that leading.
I hope so, Marcelle. I hope so. The deeper the question. Well, let me say that we have a leading to marry in 2017, not too long ago. That felt like a very clear process. We were married under the care of the meeting, you know. Did we have a leading? Do we have a leading? I mean, I have some answers that are practical, but like we live separately right now because of work reasons, and so we wanted to live together. There are places, there could have been places closer. But no, Jean had always wanted, we both grew up in Texas. We didn't know each other at the time. But so we're from Texas, which is sort of southwest. I mean, you know, it's not as southwest as New Mexico, but we both had this love of New Mexico. And Jean went there as a child every summer for many years, several years, and her sisters lived there. And I think we both just, it is something that we share a love for, and it just, we did explore other things. We looked at, you know, but I think it's the openness, the openness of the land and openness of the not knowing that is almost like or that might be a calling to do the unfamiliar. For me, who is so, both of us have been so, you know, one job for 30 years. So if there's a calling, I think it is in the unknown. I never put that in words.
does that feel to have put that into words?
It's very reassuring. It's very reassuring. It's okay. It's like it's okay not to know.
It's okay not to know.
It's okay not to know.
I'm searching for information that I am experiencing here.
Do you remember before that trip to Calcutta? So, just parens, Martha and I traveled in India together. And I remember you being sort of like so open to India, entirely unknown. So I wonder, in addition, what part, you're going to Calcutta particularly for learning, but there was a learning that was happening and there could be a learning that's happening in having your space and having, moving in with Jean and having time that you haven't had before.
With India, having never experienced anything like that. So, having never experienced anything like that, like India, it's just, if you've ever been there, it's just, and it can get a little much, but I was open, and we had so many experiences.
Santa Fe is the next India?
Openness, a willingness to see for the first time, as if for the first time. Santa Fe.
Martha, you described something that happened in you when Susan said a prayer, that it was the spirit that had gathered the group. Can you say more about what happened in that moment when you realized it wasn't just you that gathered the group?
It wasn't me. It wasn't me. That's what I realized in that moment. I was, in that moment, I was so grateful for her putting it in words. And I was so certain of God. That God has led Evergreen from the beginning. Where it's alive, it's God. And I was relieved. I was certain. That's how I felt. I mean, that's not a feeling, and I was aware of my smallness, and not in a bad way. You know, yeah, in a good way, in a reality-aware way.
We have one more minute, and I wonder if there's another question, or I wonder, Lynda, if you found some words for what was something that's rising.
I don't have a question. And that was the thing that I was working through. We can discuss that as we move on. But in this space, as we have set it up, what occurred to me when I was responding to was an opportunity for you to be out of your comfort zone. And maybe I'll just say it, that it has something to do with being out of your comfort zone and just the growth and the opportunity that is available here. I don't have a question, that is just what I have. And there is a joy that I was experiencing for you. That's what I felt was a joy for the opportunity that is available to you.
Thank you, that's our agreed upon 18 minutes. And now we'll take some time to reflect, and we're going to invite reflections from everyone at the same time.
I wonder whether it makes sense for a little bit of debrief of the people who were here, which would be the typical way, and then what did you see as well. But so I don't, Martha, I don't know. Is there anything of value in this for you?
Yeah. It's like a 180 of how to look at this big time of change. That God, I'm going to go with it. That God is leading us into an opportunity of unknown, unfamiliar space life. That's a big value. The metaphors of India and going on a trip, not knowing really, but knowing that I would learn something. I can take that with me. The audience, the actor, the word openness. So yeah, very valuable. And the generosity of all of you. Questions.
So we've not worked together before, right? How was that?
It blew my mind, quite frankly.
It was what?
It blew my mind. I was like, what is happening here? I really was, because we have not worked together before. So someone asked the question about, well, what about people that you've not worked with before? What about that? And so I was thought about that question when I was having the experience that I was having. And when I was listening to that dance, when I was experiencing that dance, the dance of the questions, that Viv, there was a dance, and there were beautiful, my experience, that there were beautiful questions that I think were really helpful to you. And then when I sat here and experienced what I've experienced, I was just like, what? So the people that were on this side, I was crying. I don't know if anybody saw that, but I couldn't contain what I was experiencing. And I didn't understand it. I knew it was spirit, but I didn't know what was happening. I was just like, well, what is going on? Not without taking too much more time, I will just say that when you said, how do I get comfortable with not knowing, that created something for me. That generated something in me, because I don't know how else to say it real quick, try to be quick about this. I'm interested in the tension that people experience around comfort and being comfortable and being uncomfortable. What are we comfortable with? What are we uncomfortable with? Why are we not willing to experience the uncomfortable when spirit is in the uncomfortable? So for me, and then you shared the question about the play, that enabled me to ask the question about comfort. It was your question that helped me to formulate my question. So in regard to that dance, it was Lola's question that helped me to formulate my question. But I waited, I was just trying to get the information. And that's what enabled me to ask that question. I didn't have a question in regard to the joy that I was experiencing. I was waiting for, I was shifting, looking for the goal, looking for the question, looking for the comment, and I wanted to wait, and I sat with it until I could express it at, I believe, the time that was right for me to express it, to express what I felt I could express and should express. So the question is, we've never done this as a group before. It was like, what? We've never done this as a group before? This was, my experience was quite powerful, so I'm done.
And I would say that to that, some of us know each other in this process for years.
Yes.
And all of us know somebody else in this process. So when I saw that Lynda had something going on, I knew that Lynda didn't want us to go to what was going on with Lynda, which is why I went to you.
Yes.
Yes.
And I don't know Martha well, so that's the other thing. I don't know Martha. We've met each other once before, but once or twice before. I've seen you here and there, but we don't know each other. She doesn't know me. I don't know her, and so that was the other thing. I was just like, what?
Well, one of the questions is, was God able to work with us as a team? And I experienced that, particularly with Lynda. There was a moment when we exchanged a glance, and from that glance, we knew which of us was going to ask the next question. Because we both had a question, but I knew, and that happened with Viv too. Same thing. We looked at each other, we didn't say anything, we just knew who's going to ask the next question. So for me, there was that sense of, God using us as an orchestra, a symphony of the Spirit, guiding the whole process.
Great. Anything more? What'd you see?
There was a moment when I saw all the tension go out of Martha's body around the openness. Just sort of like let go.
I guess I found myself, and I confess, trying to judge what was the right thing for Martha. And I tried to keep that down. But the two things that struck me was the most emotional part of her presentation seemed to be the child in the middle of the night. And I didn't hear anyone ask a question about that, and wondering if there was a reason why. And then the second thing that came up to my question is are you having second thoughts about your decision? And I think that question came up in the discussion, but I wasn't quite sure if that was squarely looked at. And I just wondered about those.
I'll address the part with, the part of you waking up in the middle of the night. I let that go and didn't follow that thread, only because I had heard Martha said she had wrestled and reconciled with that. Like she had made peace with making friends with that, and that she was okay with it waking her up in the middle of the night. That it was bubbling on the surface of her initial presentation, but she had reconciled with it. And it didn't seem to still be a question for her. So that's why I didn't feel called or led to explore that part. Can't speak for the other folks, but that was my experience.
I really was benefited from the questions that were asked, especially the one about bringing in the role of in a play. I would have never thought of something like that, but it'll give me some food for thought for the future. But I'm wondering why no one addressed the sadness of losing friends. And I'm thinking to myself, that might be because I've had to lose so many friends over the years. We've moved a lot of times. But that was pretty intense. But I guess it went on, and there was all kinds of issues that could have been focused on, so I guess you have to choose in the time you've got.
If I might respond to that again, I think in my experience, right, I have sort of learned to take all those curiosity sort of things and set them aside. Because when I started talking about what makes a good audience member and the play and the setting, right, I even preface it with the phrase, what's coming up for me? And that was it. It was something bubbling up in me that didn't seem initially related, but it was almost felt tangential a little bit. But that's what felt like it was bubbling up from the inside of my core or my spiritual center, as opposed to a curiosity question off the top of my head. Because I do think those other questions pop up, like, well, you sure you want to go? Or maybe you should be rethinking this, or and trying to let that part of it go to find out, like, because if you're thinking of this as like a team, or I think Marcelle used the word harmony, right? If we all have pieces of the divine, right, that we're trying to like arise between us, we have to get out of our own heads to let that work, so to speak.
I wondered, I guess, where there was a place for Martha's grief. I wondered if where that might have fit in. I mean, I think it was helpful to kind of go with this sense of openness to a new adventure, and that this is a new chapter in her life and all that. But there was, I mean, don't we want to hear each other and sort of give a place for the grief part? So
I want to say that Martha's expression of that part of herself that's waking her up in the night was really strong. She's an actress, so she knows how to express emotions in a way that's powerful, and we got it, that's a powerful place. And I thought I would ask her a question about that. And I sort of weighed how to ask a question, and there was partly the way in which it was phrased that made it hard to ask a question in the time that we had. And so I was also sensing, how is God at work in the time that we have, in the 18 minutes that we have. And if we'd had 35 minutes, I bet we would have gone there. But and I don't know how much this is me and how much is God guiding us in the group, but it was like that sense of how it ends, where she's left with is important, and sort of to leave her in the grief would not have been helpful.
I felt that these questions were, you used the word gold about them. These questions were gold for me because, I don't know, that they frame the experience in a light that I needed to know is there. I know my grief. These people know, these two know me so well, and that I can cry and grieve, and I do need to. But what I most feel that I got, that I needed, was the affirmation of a leading, and a way to approach that I was lacking, or I need to nurture these things that you presented.
So we're gonna take just a few more, Reba, or maybe one more.
Well, I think you were asking about our response, and I was just really honoring the fact of the privilege of being able to bring in such a heavy, I'll use the word heavy. I mean, I can list off moving, grieving, all this. I could list from my own experience, but just the privilege of being able to be so intentional. It isn't the preparation, but just what a privilege in such a life moment. I guess that's the word. To be able to bring that into a space where people are just listening to you. It was just a privilege to watch that in a real moment. Yeah.
Francis, what?
I thought the real gold from Martha was her last statement about how do I accept the discomfort of the unknown. Like, to me, that was the jewel, that each of you went inside and found a little piece to crack that open for her to answer that question. But to me, that was the gold. I don't know if she knew it was the gold when she put it out there, but to me, the grief was very clear, but that wasn't what she asked. That wasn't the part she's confused about. She knows the grief part. She's like, how do I get comfortable with the unknown? And then I saw your relationship with her, Viv, going, okay, when did she have this before? And what can I ask her that will remind her that she's really wise about this? And then it just kind of bounced. It was a dance. It just bounced. I was confused about what was going on with Lynda. Like, I was just like, my assumption was Lynda was kind of triggered, and this was like fitting with part of her life too, and it was hard because there was a bunch of emotional coming up, and you all didn't go there. You know what I mean? Like, you touched it, like you let her know you saw it, but then you stayed on task, and then Lynda figured out what she needed to, what jewels from that were for you.
Yeah.
Yes, there you go.
There
you go.
So it showed a way that even if you're not the focus person, something might be touched in you.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Quick question. Is there a different word we can use? I honor the fact that you touched on this, but I'm curious, is there a different word we can use than triggered? Because triggered seems like a negative term from most of my experiences with it. And I'm wondering, when we're bringing things up or when we allow the spirit to bring something up, sometimes it's like wakes us up to a template. We're all going through a similar ambiguity struggle. But I don't know, is there another word you've found that the evoking concept that it's bringing
Touch.
something up, but we don't
Touch
call
would
it
be
a
another
trigger,
word.
we might call it something someday.
Touch would be another word that doesn't have the connotation, it seems to me, that trigger does.
Or activated,
Or I said, what's rising up in me,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Or I resonated with.
Resonate.
And I'd like to add something very quickly is, Francis, you touched on it. Oftentimes, the focus person will end their opening with a question. So in their talking, their sharing, they will often close it with a question, taking all of that information and closing it with a question. It's their question, it's what they're looking for, it's the question that, and I wrote that question down, because that was the question for me. I felt like she had addressed the 2:30 waking up and that struggle. Like you said, the question for me was, that was for me what I felt like she wanted attention to. How do I get comfortable with not knowing?
So now what we're gonna do is break you into small groups and have you do what we did.
we thank Martha for sharing.
And one of these groups, we would like to be on the live stream. Okay? So is there anyone here who would be willing to be photographed or filmed as you do this? If you are, put your hand up.
I can do it. How do you decide who's in a group?
Okay.
Wow.
So, Kate, you're, okay, so we got Francis, myself, RuthAnn, and Kate. We're gonna be over there near Helix and such. So there's 4. Can we get, maybe, do you think of a way to break folk off?
so how many people do we
There's-
have left after that?
There's about 15 then.
I'm wondering if the people who are not from this meeting, like if they're close to each other, like in space, like if it might be good for them to be together as a group and see if they might like being a group.
So get geographic locations so that would mean Tom and Peter would be in a group together.
And I think so, if we have 3 groups of 5,
Yeah, you're Germantown too, aren't you?
5, that would be good. And maybe each group should have someone experienced in the process.
Well, I can be with the Germantowners, and I am experienced.
So form groups of 4, except for the other group that we've already formed. And then you all can assign yourself.
Yes, we're
So you find find a group.
Yeah, and what you're gonna do, everybody, what you're gonna do is you're gonna use the guidelines
You find 4 people to be in a
to
group.
do the process in an hour.
You want to be in a group with
And we'll be back here at 2:30.
Rita and Terry, would you do together?
Where's the Germantown?
What I wanted to ask.
I'm not.
2:35?
That's what I have.
I'm not.
3:35.
Are you enjoying?
We need an experience.
Well, I am, sort of.
All right, you take care.
One of my churches.
So I won't see the last part.
Roberta, you live in Germantown?
No, she lives in Newtown Square.
You can be
You
an
want me to group together?
Sure.
All right.
I wouldn't mind joining Germantown, but I
Okay, our two guys.
wouldn't be an ongoing.
Where are you from?
Are you gonna join up with them?
I don't think
You can go, Dana and
I guess I'm.
Do you need another person? Thank you very much.
I don't know, I guess. I don't know what happened.
Because Patricia needs you.
Patricia can be with us as well.
We have room over here also.
No, I saw him leave.
So maybe the two of you, good if you're
You are busy. You're welcome here.
Sounds good to me.
And I think it's gonna be perfect.
So I guess we need either Martha or.
It's terrible.
So you have four of you and you need a convener?
What?
You, Terry, or?
Attention to.
I could come up with one, but do you want to like test a couple and see which one you'd prefer?
Well,
If
let's
it's
see
your
if,
question, then you.
I mean, maybe you have one that would
I
work
don't.
better.
okay, so Kate doesn't, Francis, do you have?
I can do it. It doesn't matter.
And you have something that you think would be good? You would focus on that, right. Do you have a preference?
I'm fine with not doing it.
Okay.
Okay.
So, is somebody willing to be the convener?
See his phone out.
No, what we're hearing is it's only sending us, but it's making.
Are we going to do it the same times that you just did it, that long?
No.
We have an hour,
I
so
don't
it
think I
could
can
be
talk
the
that
whole.
Well,
Unless you ask me good questions.
we'll see if you can do 15 minutes, because that's what the time frame calls
We're
for.
going to do 15 minutes?
Okay?
Okay.
Do you want to convene?
If you want me to, I can.
Go for it.
All right, let me make sure my phone is working. So just a reminder that we're going to be focusing on the Spirit as it's operating among us and through RuthAnn at this time. And we're going to be asking open-ended questions. And how's this sound coming out? Felix, is it okay? All right.
It's pretty good. I think we're going.
And we're going to be present with you in this moment, and you can trust that that's so. So we'll begin with 15 minutes. First, we'll just center, and from that quiet, you can speak as you're ready, and I'll keep track of 15 minutes, RuthAnn. If I could find my darn timer, there we go. And during that time, share your particular focus item and anything else that's pertinent to it. We'll be listening, holding you in prayer as that happens, and then we'll go into, are there any clarifying questions? And then settle for a few minutes, and from that we'll have 35 minutes of inquiry into the topic that you bring to us. And following that, we'll have a little bit of time to say, how did we do? Did we stay on focus? Did we keep from offering advice? Did we,
Paul said he was gonna be focused, so we're gonna have one person, and I'm gonna convene. Is that right?
listen to one another and to the divine?
We have less than an hour.
As you're led, you can speak from the silence.
We really have 40 minutes. Okay, so it's 20.
Okay.
So there's gonna be one focus person and.
So we're gonna focus on, is that a good idea? I think so.
Yeah, okay.
Spiritual, right, okay. So we're gonna sign it. And then I'm gonna welcome you to speak out of the silence of whenever you're ready. So you don't have to rush, you can let the silence as long as you want.
All right, yes, one focus person, and we're going to follow.
Thank you for convening.
The full time has been engaged.
Would you like to be the one that we focus on?
Working on immigrants. Yes, I've worked with immigrants in Kentucky and
Yes, so it'll be like.
And so down there.
Okay, so we're going to
And,
do this. So then we'll have some data what we're going to do. Yeah.
Closer to our daughter. But that's not the issue. The issue is that would I continue as intensely work with immigrants? Well, as it turned out,
So I'm going to state my question and then give you a little background, and then I'll reframe the question and see if it comes out differently. My question has to do with my path forward, especially when it comes to funding the ministry that I feel called to. So I'm in a decision-making process, and one of the opportunities I have is to apply for a fellowship that's been recommended to me by people who seem to know what they're talking about. But it's a very liberal and controversial funder whose organization I would then have to put on my resume, and the whole world would know. And I keep struggling with this idea of coming out into a kind of McCarthy era as a socialist, funded by a socialist, you know. And part of me is like kind of exhilarated to come out as a socialist, and the other part of me is just like, am I willing to like a turtle with its neck stretched out on the chopping block? You know, there's this huge feeling of dread for the repercussions because I was raised in a very conservative biblical worldview, although my dad worked the civil rights movement underground, but he stayed underground and he kept his job. And I learned how to work underground. Here I am coming out. I don't know, maybe there's a different way I should be going so that I can maintain my relationship as a bridge builder between a conservative world and a liberal world, which is really where I have spent my life. In this this is my reputation, you know, that I can flow between worlds and build bridges and love people from very, very different backgrounds and belief systems. Never wanting to really align myself with one or the other in public very often. I was recently introduced in a professional setting as a Quaker, and I was like surprised that my reaction was like, they said it out loud that I'm Quaker. Like, I wonder how that's going to affect my career relationships, my professional relationships. So I'm in this mode of deciding, will I apply for this fellowship? Or is there another way to fund what I'm doing right now? Or is there another way forward in general? So, just to give you a little more detail, in the late 90s, I had the privilege of going with the Philadelphia Leadership Foundation to South Africa. And I came back, and yet I really didn't totally come back. Like, part of my heart was so transformed. It was like a different me. And subsequently, I lost a lot of what I considered my, what I might look at now as my crutches. But they were, I felt like rugs were pulled out from under me at that time because I had to welcome a different view of the United States, of equity, of my role in building a more equitable society, and what I assumed was right, quote unquote right. And then I went through a divorce, lost my house, struggled in custody courts, and things like that. Finally quit the court system, just said that is a violent place to live. I cannot live there. And I'm not going to waste my children's funding, on lawyers. So I just walked away from it. And that's when I took classes at Pendle Hill with Dan Snyder. And I got to do 3 semesters there, which was another huge, breath of fresh air, I can ask questions. This is a safe place. I can welcome the changes that have to happen in my life. So,
journaling for 7 minutes to get the trauma out of your system so that as a medical student you can see the next patient.
In this process, I really learned to challenge my assumptions. And I welcomed that discipline. And
so many ways in which
I think the rubbing shoulders with a community of people willing to do this together reminds me regularly to challenge my assumptions and let go of things I thought were right. So, the practical work I'm doing right now is that I live and work with the Lenape Indian tribe of Delaware. And this community is on a river. If you go down this river and cross the Delaware Bay and up the next river, directly across, that's my mother's birthplace. And my grandmother was a midwife there among the rural people. So she was the midwife to the people on this river because every other generation crosses the river. So they don't marry too close to each other in their communities. So it was illegal to marry outside the community. We had 3-way segregation, red, white, and black in Delaware. So they would cross the bay, and this was thousands of years of bridal rule, apparently. And here I am on this river, my mother was born in that river, and I'm really feeling a sense of honor and respect for my grandmother's people that were denied their ethnicities. So I'm feeling like, wow, this is such a privilege to honor part of my bloodline that's been denied. And I love languages, so I've been working on the language, working with cultural restorationists, trying to understand the difference and the similarities, the common ground between Christian Indians and Native American traditionalists, and the direct descendants of this group that are neither. And what is self-definition, self-designation, self-determination? How are these part of our democracy, our truer way? And I advocate for the river. And I've been doing a terrible job. And it's been really, really hard work. And I love a good challenge. So I can't boast about a whole lot of accomplishments, but it's beautiful work. It's challenging work. I love the people I live with and work with, and I have a hard time funding myself to stay there. There's not a lot of work there, and it's very expensive to commute to work. There's not much public transportation. I'm trying to be greener. I don't want to put, a lot of miles on a private car. How do I live with more integrity and honor this ancient river and this ancient lifeway? So, here comes this great big foundation fellowship that could fund me for 18 months, giving me the potential to follow through on a whole bunch of open doors and be more dependable. So I have this big hankering to be more dependable and efficient and effective. I'm having less hesitation about applying for it, but I still struggle. So part of the world that I still have my foot in, both feet, I love, my heart, is in this old Methodist camp meeting. It's not Methodist anymore, but it's a historic site. My parents own cottages there, my sister and my niece. And it's right on the border of the new national park at Woodlawn, which has an ancient archaeological site of the Lenape. And nobody in the national park world talks about it. And nobody in the historic world talks about it. And so I walk around saying, how will we tell the story, and how will we build the Lenape descendants to hold the microphone, to hold the talking stick and tell their own story? They're embarrassed they don't know their story. So how do we build their potential to hold that talking stick and be the docents of their own ancient history and their own rivers? How do we build the tribal youth to be the environmental advocates with the voice of spiritual authority in their own ancient homeland? And then how do we relate to the federally recognized tribes that grew up with Midwestern lifeways? So there's just so many wonderful things to work on. And this new national park at Woodlawn next to this Methodist camp meeting is one of those transitions where I'm working with very conservative people struggling to understand how to live well with their environment, the river, the national park, instead of hibernating. And to them, I think they already think I'm very liberal, dangerously liberal. So there's a lot of questions about whether they'll trust me. But I started a historic preservation and education committee at the camp meeting, and I'm helping them understand their own roots as kind of a utopian experiment on earth as it is in heaven, glory of all creation, healing through the interconnectedness of all living things. And I'm helping them see how their story fits into the story of the Bancroft experiment, or the other early refugees along the Brandywine River. So I'm really like walking between worlds.
And I would like that to not
and wondering
clouded over during a lot of
how to fund it,
being spiritually disconnected.
whether to accept this open society fellowship.
Just talked about being inside.
So we've got 3 minutes remaining in the 15-minute period, which you can use as you choose.
I can't talk to anybody about this.
You can share more about something, or we can simply sit and
Well, the only other thing coming to mind has to do with the arts, and I really feel a huge gratitude toward Pendle Hill for investing in me and helping me see the power of the arts in social change. And so I'm wondering if I'll be able to leverage somehow this.
Sort of like getting overexcited in the sense.
It almost seems, as I'm saying it, it almost seems like I'm in this triangle between liberal Quakerism, where we talk about the power of the arts and social change and the welcoming of all expression, equity, out in the open, and then this little Methodist camp meeting where it's been isolated, been fearful, been closed society, and then the Native American community that is just living in the aftershocks of so many earthquakes, as it were. And that's like my little trinity, where I kind of wait. I feel like this speaker in the middle of our circle just listening. Like I'm just in the middle listening to all these voices from all the different angles. I'm just listening and wondering.
Well, oh, good.
Something about belonging comes up for me. Being in so many worlds, where is that belonging? And how maybe as I'm getting older, I wonder how long can I live with so much ambiguity? How long can I live with so much fluidity? And do I need to choose a place to grow old gracefully? Maybe that's part of my deep dive.
Are there any clarifying questions?
I don't know if you can answer this briefly, but when you said, and I've done such a bad job, I didn't know what that meant.
That's
not
that
a
doesn't sound like a
okay.
clarifying question. I would say a clarifying question is sort of a point of fact.
Okay.
More often. But that could come up in the 35.
Okay.
Any clarifying question for you, Kate?
No.
And I think that I have none either. So we'll just settle in from that. We'll explore with you. And I'm setting the clock for 35.
I'm wondering about the directions that doors can open as you described doors open.
Society, I think that this is shaped like pushing us out, like gravity pushes us to grow. And the bad things that happen to us are precious. And I worry about the spiritual quakes, I feel like we're a little bit too waiting.
So something that
honoring the gift of
I see in my therapy work with my clients, but I've experienced it so powerfully in my life many times, is that whatever the facts are, the quote-unquote facts of your situation, like your experience is powerfully shared by the story in which we place those facts. And so the day I was at the Telling Your Health Story conference, all day I was remembering.
I'm wondering
viscerally the day that
how much more uncomfortable it might be to go without the funding. And there's something that struck me about
my child from the pool, and 2 nurses arrived 10 minutes before he went into the pool.
in an unpejorative way, the testimony of integrity. And if you're able to do your work from that place without any funding.
That's a great question. Just brings me back to that place of how dependable can I be, how efficient and effective. I think the eco-anxiety of Earth crisis comes into play a little bit with my desire to do well now. That might be part of my push to get more efficient and effective and urgent, which I recognize can be distracting.
This is going to be a great story when I write it down. It's going to be really interesting. And I thought, okay, like this one's safe. Now we'll worry about the other one and about their father. But it's like I know, like a story.
And weaning myself off fossil
if you
fuel
don't have a story that makes sense to you, your life can fly apart. And that, I mean, that could happen quickly.
Living in a
and
more
the damage could go on for decades.
cooperative
I've seen that in my own
lifestyle.
So,
what will catapult?
Like I know a story is powerful. So when I see a whole conference about telling your health story, it's like making these really terribly destructive, grinding, toxic things that people are living through.
When I heard you speaking about whether or not to allow the funder to fund, if the funder were to fund, part of what I heard had to do with the funder being controversial, and by that I think you were referring to being socialist during, as we enter what you perceive to be a McCarthy era. So I wonder about that integrity piece in your sense. Do you feel like this is a funder with whom your
social service infrastructure that would provide the support, even though you would think that this should exist in this wealthy country?
Trilogy, your place in the center of the trilogy is inconsistent.
She don't have a lot of strength, but she could sit at a computer and write a story.
Or are you more concerned about others' regard of that funder?
If I didn't have to put it on my resume, I'd be fine with the funding. I think that the funding is accurate in all 3 settings. But having to talk about it in those 3 settings is a very different thing.
It's not always appropriate. Doesn't always fit.
And you would need to talk about it in those settings.
I don't always find the right
It would be on my resume. It would be, like, the logo would be attached to my work. So, like I said, it's like a turtle with its neck stretched way out. It's like very vulnerable.
Can you give me an example?
It's so amazing, but I think it would look like this
But the purpose of the funding and the purpose of the funding.
I have that feeling about it.
are totally in alignment with honoring each of these three worlds.
Like, this feels like.
And the intersection of these three worlds, learning to live together well. Learning to live together well, together well, together well. That's what I breathe. Is this going to inhibit my ability to live together well with those I love?
Yeah, or in your past. Yeah.
So, that leads me to my pieces. I clearly have a sense that I use the term Papa for God, so I'm going to use that term. Or what term do you use?
Spirit.
Okay.
The great mystery is what we use.
I have a sense that the great mystery wants you to have all the resources that you need. I have that clear sense.
I have a hunch.
And so my question is, have there been patterns in your life that have kept you in the past from receiving the resources that the Great Spirit wants you to have?
I feel like that happens.
I don't know if I could verbalize them, but the answer wants to be yes. I don't know. I will say this, okay, this is coming to me very clearly. I have avoided talking about money my entire life. I've avoided money. And I remember thinking about my parents arguing about money. When my father was doing all this civil rights work, and we actually lived in kibbutz for a while, my mother's side of the family, we're talking about hiring a lawyer to take us kids away from the cult. And that side of the family was giving money for my mom to bring us out to visit.
Because I had a connection.
You know, we didn't have private funding. When you live in kibbutz, you don't have private funding to go, visiting your relatives at any point. So accepting money from that side of the family was like a traitor to the socialist side of the family. And I never wanted to be involved in arguments about money. When I was married, I had nothing to do with money. And when he left, I had no credit card, no debit card, no bank account, no access to anything. I just never knew anything about it, didn't need to know anything about it. I was content with whatever I was given, I'll make do. So I definitely have not wanted to talk about money, and I have worked really hard to do a lot with hardly any funds. And people have often said, why don't you get a real job? And I have from time to time gotten kind of bottom feeder jobs just to keep me able to do this work. Which I still, I still work for money sometimes. But, yeah, I've avoided money. I've avoided discussions of money. And I'm a grant writer. I'm a good grant writer, but I don't put much in my line item.
But the question you bring is whether it makes sense to apply and possibly accept money from this organization. So you are talking about money. That's clear. That was in your
beating around the bush.
No, that was in your
about
question.
I'm talking about admitting I've accepted money from a source. How controversial sources of money are. Wow. Yeah.
I'm hearing a replay of your childhood.
Yeah.
Are you feeling an opportunity, perhaps, to make peace with that?
I mean, I'm not saying it was a question.
This is certainly a microcosm of the macrocosm. I feel a lot of parallels to what's happening in the United States today, and how I have in my bloodline every segment of society, political conviction, like all running through my bloodline. So making peace with my story could bring peace to my finance and let something flow. But I can't wait for America to make peace with its factions. I have a hard time even saying Vespucci's last name.
Let's stay on RuthAnn. So Francis's question is important about money in general. And then there's this question about the controversial nature, as you put it, of this funder. Have you tested your perception with others in any shape or form to have a multidimensional view of it? Because that feels like the crux of this, is that the controversial nature of the funder, that, you know, as you perceive it, and I'm just wondering about that.
I have asked people in each of these three worlds that I walk in, but I've asked a safe person. And I guess if I go to them and I ask someone who's going to say yes, go for it, will they have my back? I've gone to people and talked to them about it in all three communities, and but I'm not sure they'll have my back when
So you've asked safe people.
Yeah.
What would happen if you were to ask the people that you know will have your back or not? The people that are going to say, you go that way, RuthAnn, forget about it. Or the ones that say, this work needs to be done. That funder isn't the one that maybe we would choose, but it will allow the work to be done. You know, or that funder isn't anybody that I would sneeze at. It has a benefit. Are there people of that nature that you can inquire of?
I don't know, maybe I just don't know who has my back.
Well, I have a different way of asking that question. So I'm assuming you have a relationship with some of your ancestors, like in your spiritual life? Have you asked them?
I haven't been in the sweat lodge in a long time. I have many ancestors.
I'm assuming this. But you haven't really sat down and asked them.
I think
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think that I haven't asked them a specific question about this funder. I think I've just been, how do I walk? Do I keep walking? Do I walk this way? Very general and really waiting for inspiration. I don't really differentiate the spirit from the ancestors. I don't really know that I know the difference sometimes. So I've been very general in my asking.
Those would be good practices to start with.
Have you been worried about the answer if you become too specific?
And stick around for an extra year if they can't get a clerk to replace me at the end of my term. They have to come up with somebody. So I'm going to be less busy in the imaginary.
I don't know, I guess I don't ask real specific questions because I'm feeling like if I just wait and I listen deeply, such beautiful and accurate things come to me. That's just been my way of waiting. And maybe I don't trust my way of asking. Like if I ask a question, I'm asking from my limited worldview. But if I wait without the question, getting a bigger answer or something. That's been my way. But maybe it's
So much about comfort versus uncomfort.
Yeah, and I'm walking in such an uncomfortable way right now. And I have been for so long that to choose one source of funding and relax, to stop juggling would be like, oh, what a relief. I don't know what I'm waiting for.
More open, but not in an overly energized way.
I will undoubtedly do more of that.
I don't want to cause any problems. I think there's a big part of me, even though I studied conflict analysis in South Africa, I really would like to avoid conflict if possible, especially because I recognize, I can smell that McCarthy-era thing happening all around me. People are very verbal about it in the communities that I work in.
So there's a fear there. Can you talk about the fear? What? Because the fear may shed some light on the faith side of the thing.
So the fear is a fear of causing division. I'm afraid of causing division. I'm afraid of breaking the delicate bridges that I've made. They're very delicate.
So I would have to go home and make a plan
I'd like to invite you to sort of sit in a place where you've said no to the funding and feel that for a moment, a couple moments, for as long as you need to. And then when you're finished with that, let me know, and I'm going to suggest something else.
prayer is his work question is hateful. I see you now that you trusted with hateful life, for maybe physically by being activism. They connected with your rhythm. Because I think it's not the rhythm that gets primary vote. Yet. And I'm wondering how you can.
I think I have some trauma triggers around
Contemplating.
I think I must have some very young, like, memories of the commie hunters and the fear of being taken from my parents because they were in a socialist community. And I just keep getting the word traitor, but it's like everybody's screaming traitor from every angle. It doesn't matter which camp I'm in. They all think I'm a traitor. So there's a place where I can't bring a settled place. And saying no to that money is almost like, oh, what a relief. I'm not gonna have to deal with those voices. And then I hear traitor. If I accept the money, I hear traitor. If I deny the money, I hear traitor.
All right, so I want you now to sit for a little bit in that place of not even applying for it, never mind denying it. And I want you to feel that in a similar way. And then, so go there for now. And I want you to listen to you as much as, I want you to listen to you, the ancestors, but to you and spirit more than to humans who are present today.
I don't do that very often, but I did. Although I must admit, in one of those cases,
Well, I don't know how we go about it. Because we saw setting up groups. Or you could, I mean, yeah, how about I could invite people to be in a group, but I would want to be some group or something.
Yeah.
Does it seem tangible, I guess is my question, does it seem
Well, probably was after
far away?
There's something in between, there's like this, the love of money is the root of all evil. And avoiding all money is like the garbled confusion of not knowing how to survive. And somewhere in that mix is this place that says, stop focusing on money.
What will the money allow becomes a question.
Yeah.
Or what will the absence of it not allow,
So
or
it's
allow?
It's the stability factor. It's being able to sleep in one place where I live and work and have an office, and people can visit me there, and it's a presence.
How does that ripple out beyond the ways that it serves you?
It's what dependable people do. It's what the community longs for. The community longs for dependable people who can see us through storms. Steady as she goes. We're here, we've got roots, we're okay. We're steady. Steady, dependable, people can lean on me. It's So,
Am I okay with continue? So, RuthAnn, I know a little bit about the Lenape. I know that there are the people who are keeping the land, and there are the people who are keeping the story. And the people who are keeping the story are far from the land. Money allows you to be dependable in a way. There might not need to be a choice between the difference of the story and the difference of the land. But I wonder whether those say anything in this.
Part of my work is to figure out how to fund cultural exchanges between those who stayed behind and those who went to Ontario and those who went to Oklahoma, so that I'm preparing the youth group to do a traveling exchange program to an art school at Bartlesville, Oklahoma, that, by the way, my parents have funded all their lives. And the Moravian Ontario community that has kept the northeastern woodland culture alive, as opposed to that Lakota Sioux and Cherokee domination, which has much more stereotypical Buffalo Bill stuff coming at us. So going up this way is such a rich, like, earth connection. The earth and the river and the sap of the trees. And so cultural exchange is like the basis of my gift to the community, and I'm not doing it. It's why I'm not good at what I do yet, because I haven't gotten that privilege of facilitating these cultural exchanges between the communities yet. But it's coming. It's coming. And we've taken some baby steps, and the grants are, I've done little tiny grants, building the relationships and building the baby steps, and we're getting really close. It's like coming along. But yeah, that's like the heart of it is bringing the communities, allowing the youth to feel the earth connection of the northeastern woodland people. And I was born in the northeastern woodland. I came by surprise to this river, and by surprise to find my grandmother's river. I was born in the north, and I felt, like the northeastern woodland culture is so strong, and the youth need to visit it. I also sense that there's like this environmental refugee time coming for them, and they don't know where to go because they've never been anywhere. A lot of them have never even crossed the canal to come north to Philadelphia. They don't know how to be refugees anymore. They used to know. The Wallamolam is a story of refugees. And being okay with the flight, being okay with the relocation is part of our story now. And so I think it's part of the gift I bring is that I'm okay with forced removal, and I'm okay with like living with the storms, but to bring the community into an ability to travel together is part of my gift to the future of the tribe, I think. I think that's like really clear this moment today. Thank you. There's something in what you're saying about the story and the land, and my connection to the story and my connection to the land, and it's a big land.
Is that bad? I don't know. Is there something wrong with it? I don't know.
I don't want to do something out of urgency or fear of environmental crisis. I can sense environmental anxiety in myself sometimes, and I I feel a lack of integrity with my lifestyle, and I haven't weaned myself off toxins. You know, I want to be Greta Thunberg. Without judging those who don't know how to wean themselves off. And that's really where I live. You know, I live in a place where I want to set an amazing example of integrity without being judgmental. No matter what the cost.
When you say with toxins, what does that mean?
I'd like to wean myself off plastic and fossil fuel and toxic processed food and I can't have it all.
What do you think would happen if you were to, you said you've not taken a sweat lodge in a while. What do you imagine might happen if you were to bring this into the lodge?
The question. It's a great question.
I think I'd take money. I think I'd come, I think I know that I would take the money. And I just have fear about it. I just have fear about what it's like to cut off some of the people I love and that I work with, and to cause this question to come into the community, because the community will be divided even. And it's heartbreaking to know that my choice will cause conflict, but the conflict is already there, they're just not talking about it.
Is it possible
I was doing my job to bring this conflict out into the open.
I'm wondering if there's a way to share the decision with the people, such that, and in a way that it is not divisive.
I want to do that. Thank you.
What might that look like?
Well, I'm a writer, so I might somehow write about the struggle I'm having, and then share it more widely than I have, because I've had small conversations with people in each community, mostly safe people, and they've basically just said, we need this money so badly, just do it.
Mm.
But I don't know, I think they haven't lived through the McCarthy era like I did, like my parents did. And
I visualizing doors to spirit, and I wasn't making it clear in the way I framed.
Can you ask your question again?
What would that look like in terms of bringing that to a broader audience?
So maybe I need to share the story of my first experience in the McCarthy era as a little child, and my childlike view of it, and how I carry that for my family of origin, wishing they could love one another better, and knowing that all four of my grandparents have gone on, that they have come to peace with it, and that we could too, here on earth as it is in heaven. So maybe that story is really like the play, you know, if I could do a play about how this child lived it, and then draw the parallel to the future.
Sorry, stop.
If that parallel if that play were written in such a way that anyone could see the parallel in their own lives. I would feel like I'm giving that gift to the community. Maybe that's too much of a metaphor for the average person to jump, and maybe it's a delay tactic, but it would feel therapeutic to me. On the other hand, writing an expose, as though I'm writing for the newspaper, here's the struggle I'm going through. Here it is in black and white, like a newspaper article. Will you read this?
So we're at time, and
Thank you.
I think we've explored some things.
Definitely, thank you.
Is there anything that we are aware of that contributed to light being shed here, or I was aware, for instance, that I was on a train of thought and didn't know if I was taking more time than I ought to have. And that's why I checked with you all to make sure that I wasn't holding you up in some way.
I think that's something that we would know better if the four of us were to meet regularly. I think.
But checking it out allowed me to sort of get a green light from you.
Yes. Yeah, I think when you work with people regularly, also I know I felt as though you had more experience with the questions than I did, so I was grateful for your being able to ask them.
I actually felt when she stopped and like checked with you guys, for me it was like, okay, like the spotlight's off me just for a minute and I can like get used to where I am now because I've come to a new place. And it was almost like a little intermission. And she just looked at you and she looked at you and she wasn't looking at me, and I was just like, okay, what am I doing? Check in with myself. So that's an interesting side effect of that tradition that you demonstrated.
Does that point to us being too intense with you, or?
I don't think so, but I think it acknowledges that it is intense. And like I said earlier, the first time I experienced this process with this style, I felt like I was in the spotlight too long. And so that is like, I think probably a lot of people feel like that when they first get into this style of working together. Like, I'm in the spotlight for so long. So it just is an interesting thing to keep in mind. And taking a chance for the others in the group to just look at each other and nod is a relief.
I felt like the questions that you two asked were good ones that drew out some more understanding from RuthAnn.
I felt comfortable with all the questions.
I felt like you two asked like a catapult question, each of you, and then you like guided me to go there a little more. Just go there a little more. Play with it a little differently. Look at it in a little different light. But you were building on what each of your questions had taken me to. So it really did feel like a team.
I think the one question you don't necessarily need to answer, but I sort of wish I had asked was, so what is getting in the way of you doing spot lodges, or being more in touch with your ancestors or the spirit?
We don't have time for
But
that.
we don't have time for that, but that to me is a piece that...
When you asked me, and I got choked up because I I miss that. And so it did bring me to another place that I need to take care of.
And I was thinking of that question as well.
Yeah. It's another place that I want to take care of.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wanishi.
Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Wanishi.
And how do you say you're welcome? Or is there that term? How do you respond to Wanishi?
Oops. I think it's just thank you. Wanishi, Wanishi.
It goes both ways.
Yeah.
Do you know Boone? Sandra Boone Murphy?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, she works with a very different, she works mainly from what I understand with Christian leaders, and I work mainly with traditionalists, so we're in very different worlds.
Right.
But I think we're both being challenged to be better bridge builders between worlds.
You know, 24-hour.
Other people I know in this working for the immigrants, they don't. They're strong people, but everyone's got to break their
Yeah, but that's
Including you.
Yeah, including you. But that's definitely, when we talk about the social ills of we can balance maybe a never-ending like, that we can't possibly. So there's, I think almost every human being has to wrestle. The need is so great. There's only so much that can be done.
What questions they would?
What questions would they have? Yeah, but they were struggling.
Like, I just saw the Harriet movie a couple of weeks ago. The first that makes it
Some people are amazing.
She did retire. She did retire. She did get married and get a house. Lived to be 90.
Yeah, well.
And that's a story or a gift in itself. That she did that. That life was full enough to retire.
What did she do when she retired?
She lived up in upstate New York.
Apple trees.
She had a house. She actually started a. I think I'm gonna get the words wrong, but what we would call a retirement home today. She was gifted a house by one of the senators from New York State, and she took it. Taking care of themselves. She started a school. I mean, these are the things she's doing in retirement.
Yeah, well.
But she couldn't do it alone either.
Right.
Those are all things she needed help with.
What is this?
Very grateful to you.
Yeah, well, I'll think about it later. Why the heck did you do that?
Well, thank you.
Well, your life is a gift.
You're welcome. I've done it before, so it was easy for me.
Yeah.
I have to hit the restroom.
Pressure on myself.
What am I experiencing? What am I experiencing? That is how I determine
Okay, y'all, come on back.
what's happening. Am I listening to the inner guide? Am I being fitted to the inner guide?
I haven't. I don't. I did attend a Quaker school in Philadelphia, and I guess since then I have explored a lot of religions, including Judaism, not Catholicism. How was that?
Yeah, it was pretty close.
Yeah, but I always described it as
I'm happy to have
Catholicism
you in
without the
person.
suffering part.
We're regathering.
Well, my spirituality is not quite a traditional Catholic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Caring. I want everybody to share that part of
Where there's love, even if it's not perfect.
You're right. And that's the key. That is the key. That is the key. Love. That is absolutely wonderful. Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay. So we had a couple people who coming into the room were virgins, not having practiced this before. And now you're not. We won't go into the details, huh? But we will. In any event, what I'm interested in hearing from you first is, how did it feel? Not what happened, you know, from the how did it feel?
I just want to know, there's a video of virgins being lost, that's what.
There are.
That's where I went.
What did you say, Terry? I didn't hear you.
Viv started it, saying some people are virgins when they came in, and they no longer are, and I want to know if there's a video.
How'd she know?
I would say very intense. Intense.
Intense?
And I feel like tired now.
Tired. So drink a lot of water. They say when you've done spiritual work, and we've all been engaged in spiritual work, that water is something that helps us to ground.
That might be why. My wife drinks water all the time, and I consider her a very spiritual person.
Grabbing our water now.
How else did it feel?
Rita.
Real?
No, Rita.
I'm feeling it now. It was such a gift to have some people listen to me that long. I mean, you talk to people, but it's never that long. And it was like a big gift. I really felt that. And it's like you see your thoughts, because you don't until you let them out.
And who was a listener that felt like they received a gift as well? Who was speaking and felt like they had like Rita, that there was a gift?
Absolutely.
So it looks like it's unanimous.
It was.
So that's how we felt. What else?
I feel like right now, if I don't write some things down, I might lose these insights, and I wish that the people that I sat with would write a few reflections down, and then I tell myself, wait a minute, I can trust the divine. I don't have to write it down. But there is something so rich and fresh, and I feel a little fragile, you know? And I long to not lose this.
That's right. So it's raw and fresh and fragile. And here's some notes.
Oh,
wow. In the group that I'm with, oftentimes we do that. Because it is so new. It's like the dew in the morning, or you ever been on a lake in the morning when there's all of that, and then it's gone. It's new. How else?
Well, the lesson I learn over and over is that, I mean, the listening part is a real practice and a gift. But I have opportunities to do that all the time that I let go, that I miss. Just listening to someone else, wherever they are. That 16 hours a day.
Not needing to fix them, not needing to anything. Just be present. What else? Anything else?
I found most of it comfortable. At one point I didn't have a lot of questions come up, and I felt a little anxious about that. Like I was like, am I doing my job?
Yeah.
Kind of. That was the most uncomfortable part to me, was when I didn't feel like I was being used that much. But for the most part, it felt pretty comfortable. But I've done this similar stuff.
So when there's not a question in a person, there may be a question forming in another, and it may be the perfect time for silence, or just sitting with, or if maybe it's audible silence, but there is a prayer going in your heart.
You just said audible silence. That's wonderful.
I definitely felt the dance of the questions. So you brought a question that I call a catapult. And then Viv was able to like, come on, man. What somebody today used the term tease it out. She was the one who was doing the teasing it out. And then my other teammate here brought another catapult question. And to me it was just like, wow, are these very different topics we're on? And then Viv was able to actually show how they were woven together even while she was teasing them out. So it was a definite dance. One thing I'm surprised about being in the hot seat is that for some weird reason, maybe it's implied, and I need to meditate on this some more, but for some weird reason I thought there would be a more literal, I see that of God in you in this way. As a real literal statement. And instead it was, we were like creating a new recipe, and these ingredients had never come together before, and they're just still rising. They haven't even been baked yet. But that was like just an assumption on my part, that I'd hear something that was like, oh, that's God. I see God in you. So I don't know if that's a normal thing for a newbie to wonder, or if it's sometimes that happens and sometimes it's just implied.
So, RuthAnn, help me out, because what you're saying is you expected us to say God is there.
Or,
and I'm thinking of the godly play story where God is everywhere.
Yeah.
And we can't say, point to the birds in the sky, or the, did you feel God?
I guess as I consider my style of group work that I've come into over the years, I do a more intentional, I see the beauty. And from this time in the hot seat, it was so messy. It was more like, oh, I see my mess more clearly. But I'm sure that the beauty is coming out of it. It's just like composting or something.
So you're seeing the mess. I'm curious, did the people who were sitting in presence with RuthAnn see mess?
Yeah. And
wrong answer, Kate.
In fact, what came to my mind and kept going through over and over from Psalm 46 was, God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her in that right early. And that's in the midst of the heathens raised, the kingdoms removed, the mountains shook. And I mean, like, God's in the midst of it.
Amen.
Amen.
I wasn't in your group, but I'm going to make a comment. Any comment that came to me where I said I avoided because I was trying to frame it from the focus persons. So I'll just put that out there, that anything that I thought of many eyes, I see, or and then the other thing about messy, which I'm not commenting, I've learned not to comment on other people's, but this really is nothing superficial. And the poor people that were focus people that didn't know they were going to be. I mean, you had some time, even though I'm just saying, this is nothing. I was struck that nothing's superficial about this.
And in preparation for a group, the person who would be the focus person knows in advance and has time to prepare and to sort of tease away the chaff. Is that what they call that stuff outside?
Yeah, chaff.
Chaff, right? And find the kernel a little bit more closely. And sometimes this is what's up for me, and I'm not sure where to go. And then it's kind of like a potluck, take what comes. Berta.
One thing as a listener, I did feel that my experience was on many of those levels that Marcelle described. That I was listening with my heart, with soul and awareness of the energy between us and among us. And so it did feel very, like a very powerful gift. And I just wanted to elaborate because just saying it was a gift doesn't give all the layers of it.
Right. Sometimes the thing that I learn the most is whatever feels like it's whatever an anti-gift is. Oh man, that when that happened, I was X or Y. And wow, what about that can talk to me? And what do I need to learn from that? How might I befriend that? So gift and anti-gift.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
An aha moment and an ouch moment. Oh, the rose and the thorn.
Right.
So when something arises in a group where I have a visceral reaction that I would rather not have, what is that teaching me?
It doesn't necessarily feel like a gift, but if you really look at it, sometimes it's a big gift.
It's the sand in the oyster that becomes the pearl, if you take care of it.
One thing I wanted to say in terms of your sense of not coming to the kind of resolution that you would hope for is that that's often been my experience, especially at first with the faithfulness group. I thought, oh, this is like a mini clearness committee and I'm supposed to come out of it with clearness. But actually a clearness committee has a lot more preparation. Right. Usually the focus of the clearness committee writes an actual report that everyone reads all the background in advance, so you start at a different place. A clearness committee lasts 2 hours or 2.5 hours, just focused on one person, and you come with the intent of really helping a person get clear about something. Sometimes you don't, and you meet a second time or even a third time. there isn't the same expectation with the faithfulness group that in that 1 hour you're going to come to clearness about something. And the difference is you're going to walk with these people again and you're going to meet again and again over time. And so you might end with, well, I brought this stuff up and I moved a little bit, but it's not clear yet. And that may be a little disappointing, but there is a sense that, but they're going to come back and walk with me as I move through this again and again. Another thing is that with a clearness committee, it's done somewhat different ways, but one way is that at the end, the focused person can choose how they want it to end. And they could choose to have a little bit of mirroring, in which they ask the group to mirror back what they saw. You know, like, I noticed you really lit up when you said this. So it's you're not giving your opinion of what's happening, but you're just reflecting what you saw. And actually, there is room for a little bit of that in the faithfulness group too. I don't really teach it in the first time because we love to give our feedback. And what we really need to practice is our listening and our questions, because that needs to be the larger part of it. But there is a space for a little bit of mirroring, or at the end for a prayer, you know, or for the psalm that Kate recited as a kind of prayerful way to end that's...
So you all know a little bit about this process at this point, and you can bring it to whoever you choose to. So carry the water. You don't have to chop the wood. And if there's...
So I think this process is so wonderful that I've been spending the last several years trying to create resources to help people learn about it. And of course, Viv has been working really hard to create today's workshop and the live streaming and the videos so that this can be one way people learn about it. There's this book, A Guide to Faithfulness Groups, which is now available. There's also a 25-minute video called An Introduction to Faithfulness Groups, and the link is on the Releasing Ministries website. It's also on my website, which is awholeheart.com. There's a new video that's about to be put up, a shorter one, 8 minutes, called Evoking Questions. So it's a video about the kinds of questions that can be asked. On my website, there's also a link to an audio recording of a 1 hour faithfulness group, so you can listen to that. It's a nice way to get a sense of it. And so if you are excited about this and you want to share it with other people and you want to give people resources to help them learn about it, you can send them to releasingministries.org, to the ops page, or to awholeheart.com and find these resources or order this book.
Now, what some people asked me about the Johari window at the break or something like that, and I said that I would send that out to the people who pre-registered. So if you haven't pre-registered, get me your email address and I'll get you on the pre-registration.
Did you write that on the board?
What?
The name?
Johari?
Yeah.
And then, let's see, what else did I want to say at this point?
Do we have anybody from the virtual world?
Virtual people have questions?
No, the virtual people, are they still there?
There's 7 people watching. No one's asked a question in a long while.
Okay, but I just wanted.
There were some comments. We witnessed some real work being done this afternoon. And many other things like that. It seems that people are sort of gratified by those people.
And while we're having the benefit of these folks at distance, I'd like to thank the Quaker Women in Public Ministry funding, which allowed for Bonfire Media Collective to be here. And thank you to Bonfire Media, Felix and Alex. It's been wonderful. And please give love to Maddie for the way that she's helped us. And of course to Friends Center, to our sponsors, Reed Street Friends Meetings, Worship and Ministry, and Gifts and Leadings Committee of Central Philadelphia Monthly Meeting, Releasing Ministry alike. Do you have, are you interested in praying us out? Just in some way?
Yeah. Do that. So what we're going to do is we're at our end. I want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we're just going to have just a couple minutes of, yeah. So I'll do like a minute of silence. And then out of that silence, I'd like to do a prayer. Well, I'll see if that happens. But yeah, so we're at our end, and so we'll do a couple minutes of silence, and then we will, a little prayer, and then we will, and yes.
I just ask a question that, in terms of the group, and maybe this is too big of a question to answer here, but how important is like diversity or having a group that's not homogeneous, but having different opinions which make up the group?
My answer to that, Tom, would be it depends on the group. What's the purpose? And it may be that a men's group of all one race at about the same age would be the perfect group to support the members of that group. On another, it might be that people who are interested in working across some boundary, whether that be age, faith, tradition,
Politics.
Politics, yeah. Well, any kind of difference. And I think that that one group that I've been in has a tremendous blessing in that it's got people of multiple races so that we can hear each other in a way that we might not otherwise. So it depends. So here we are into silence, and then
You ready to have a little silence and end? All right. Spirit God, we thank you for the privilege of this space and this experience, the privilege of time, the privilege of ability to be in this space, this workshop, this to receive. May we take this information, take these relationships, return it to you, seek your guidance, and find a way to continue to transform ourselves and our communities. Let us have the courage to ask questions if there are more questions that we have of each other, of this work. And I pray that we will all have traveling mercies as we make our way to our next place. in Spirit's name. In whatever name. Amen. Thank you all.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Viv, for all your work.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcelle, for writing a book.
I just want to say that Mike left early, but his back is sore, yeah, that's why I had to go.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody was here.
Yeah.
And Susan wasn't gonna leave.
I have someone coming to check in there, so I might have to go down.
Yeah, as soon as I start meeting, I'll text you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for being here, it was wonderful. I'll send this.
Good luck.
I got to.
Yeah, I'll let you be.